welcome to another one of our webinars. This one is applying behavioral science to scientific health and safety, meaning mostly in the labs, research labs in particular, but you know what? Behavioral science is going to apply no matter what. And that's what Sean, Sharon, and I have chatted extensively about. That's a lot of what they do. It's still going to apply. It's sort of like, how do you do training and learning? Well, you know, adult learning principles apply no matter what. So don't worry about it. Whatever your context is, it's fine. Hope you like our Batman and Superman. Little bit of humor there. It's perhaps one of the more fun and silly opportunities, you know, we get to do. So we do think about it. Certainly please, I'm just sort of clicking here on the slides. I should have this one up here. And the Menti prompt, please do feel free to do the Menti poll. I'll have to check that out at some point later on in the, I want to say show. Am I like Johnny Carson or something like that all of a sudden? Goes back a ways. But what habit or behavior do you hope to change? Because that's it. So anyway, and we have wonderful bits of advice here from both Sean and Sharon on this to get us started. So that's enough from me. You didn't come to hear me. Let's really focus on Sharon and Sean. And I'm actually going to, because we get this request quite often, I'm going to stop sharing. And so that way people can actually see our smiling faces quite a bit there. How's that? All right, so whoever would like to go first, please give us your intro as ever you would like to share it. Sharon, would you like to go first?
Sure. So my name is Sharon Lipinski. I'm the CEO of Habit Mastery Consulting. And what we focus in on is closing the gap between what people know they should do and what they're actually doing. I call it the training gap. And we've worked with organizations in oil and gas, construction, utility. So this is kind of a new realm for me, but hopefully, like Jonathan said, some of the tips that we share will also apply to what you all are doing. I am a certified gamification for training instructor, a certified cognitive behavioral therapist for insomnia, and I'm just dedicated to helping people get healthier, happier, and safer at home and at work.
Yeah, and you know, I think I mentioned this to you when the three of us chatted, the whole certified cognitive behavioral therapist for insomnia. I feel like I could benefit from that quite a bit. So I'm going to have to reach out after the webinar. Yeah, definitely. All right. And Sean, please, sir.
Very good. My name is Sharon Kaufman. I'm CEO and founding partner of Safer Behaviors, and our organization, very similar to Sharon's, we tend to bridge the gap between plans and outcomes. Individuals will have strategies and effective plans, and they will have desired outcomes, but the connection between those plans and those outcomes are really the behaviors that they do to get there. So we have been serving the biological or life sciences industry since back in 2004. My background is in public health. I'm certified in public health. I'm a certified intrinsic coach, and I'm also certified in MBTI. I'm an MBTI provider for Myers-Briggs type indicator. So again, fascinated by behavior. That's really kind of what we love. Is it's not really what you say you do. It's really what you're doing, and we love connecting the two as well. So
yeah, actions speak louder than words, as that saying goes, right? This is fantastic. I am so excited. What's that? Go ahead.
Very important question in the chat box for you.
Oh,
we want to know, do you still have your safety costume with the cape?
Oh my God.
No.
Megan, that is so funny. So the very short story of that is I used to do a presentation, and it was how do you deal with what some refer to as problem children in training, right? Because I did a lot on adult learning. But really, it's really what do you do for the person who's really very much the classic adult learner, very demonstrative, very wants to be involved. I, in particular, I know have challenged high school teachers, college professors, and trainers alike. And so I did a little skit with, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And my moderator would read, look, over in the classroom, it's a trainer, it's a facilitator, it's trainer man. And my ex helped me outfit, and I had a shirt that she had Velcro instead of buttons. And I would do the whole Superman routine, except we had a thing that said Trainer Man and a big T, and I had a red cape as well. And thank you so much, Megan, for mentioning that. It's hysterical. Somewhere there's a picture of me. It looks like I'm in pajamas because I'm wearing, my Superman tights and all of that. So it's out there on the internet somewhere, man. But I don't do that one very often. But let's take a step away from that. But thank you, Megan, and thank you, Sharon. So I will say this is a hugely exciting topic to me, an area I've traveled in as well. And I'll be very self-serving, but it's very much about this for everyone. So the first question for both of you really is, can we talk about, who was that? Can we talk? There was some comedian that used to say that all the time. It'll come to me in 5 minutes and I'll blurt it out. But can we talk about cognitive biases, right? And how they affect our risk perceptions and decision-making. And I said self-serving, but to be honest, I know how a lot of health and safety people think, and we think we understand risk really well, but we often don't look at it through this lens of we all have our own perceptions of risk. We all think ours are right and the other person's are wrong. And our cognitive biases, confirmation bias, et cetera, that we all know quite well, play a rather significant role. Full disclosure, this is what I study, but this is, I think, a good place for us to start. So who would like to start in on this area, please? And then we'll go to the other.
Sean, why don't you?
Thank you. Okay. To me, Jonathan, we can focus on the cognitive bias or all biases for that matter. And I think that being human, I like to call that a human risk factor. I think that many of us, for a variety of reasons, whether it's formal training or just the extent of experience we have around a particular risk, we will form those biases and heuristics and all sorts of things that we are challenged with when we talk about situational awareness in labs. But to me, I think it's more important to talk about the control for the bias. And when you have an organization that sets expectations up, the question now is how engaged is that organization in ensuring that those expectations are met? Because the SOPs, they serve a lot. It's not just about consistency of behavior. SOPs serve to also bring consistency among values and beliefs within an organization. And so if you have published SOPs or written SOPs and your organization is not around to ensure those SOPs are actually being followed, then the tolerance within that organization allows for bias or a human risk factor to take control and lead to increases of risk. So that again is my thoughts. I don't know, Sharon, what are you thinking? Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe from the perspective, if you like, Sharon, of how do our perceptions of it and cognitive or other biases interfere with our ability to really develop the habits that we really want to? I mean, I'm sure that you've seen that.
Yeah, well, so that's kind of an interesting question, the way you phrase that. And I think I would even suggest that habit is in its own way a cognitive bias. I've always personally there are so many cognitive biases, and I've always kind of struggled to what is that one? And that's that. Like, there are just so many that it's not really helpful for me to kind of like target them individually. So kind of, I use a shortcut, and I think of cognitive biases as shortcuts because we have so much potential information that we could be processing. Everything that we're doing with our own bodies to make sure that we're functioning, we're healthy, we're safe. And then we have the whole external world, and we have what we're doing in our jobs. And so there's just so much information coming in that our brain needs to use these shortcuts in order to accomplish as much as possible. And though also our brains are lazy, so that even if it wasn't about getting more done, we would be doing this because it's just easier. And for me, I think the point of view is, let's just recognize that cognitive biases are happening constantly, all the time, to all of us. And what we need to do is build in some functionality that helps us break that cognitive bias, that will assist us in making a better decision at this point in time, or assist us in making better observations or assessing risk assessing risk better. We need a lot of help. There's just too much for us to do on our own. And that's also, a habit is a neural shortcut. It's a mechanism our brain uses when we're engaged in repetitive behavior so that we can be doing other things. And so that's kind of my take on viruses. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So just in case people aren't sure, so what we're talking about with, as Sharon said, mental shortcuts, and as Sean said, heuristics, those are really the same thing. And there's a deep amount of science to these, and exactly as both are saying, our brains are fantastic, but they're incredibly, I will say lazy, but really it's conserving energy. And so it doesn't want to go through tons and tons of decision making if it can come up with one of these heuristics or shortcuts. And so, yeah, that's a ton of what we do. That's a great place to start. Why don't we continue and this time maybe Sharon first, it's a little more in your area. So how do we break out of our own routines and behaviors and habits?
So this is kind of a big question.
Kind of.
And so the direction that I thought I might go with this question is to say that I think what you're really asking about is kind of complacency, that we get in these routines and we're not really paying attention to what's going on around us. And so how do you break out of that? Well, there are multiple ways of doing it. We have behavior things that we can do. One thing that we were actually talking about when we opened up are effective use of questioning. If we can ask the right questions of ourselves and of our peers, we can kind of trigger that sort of awareness. We can also do certain mindfulness practices that will break us out of the current routine that we're in. But you also want to think about kind of engineering in some of these things, looking at, what kind of work are we doing and where are the points where it's absolutely critical that people are present and aware of everything that's going on. And then at those points, build in something that's going to make sure that happens. I think, Jonathan, I shared with you that study that was done around hospitals and trying to decrease the amount of wrong site surgeries that were happening, which is surprisingly still uncomfortably common. And so what they have designed is a combination of mobile app and questions. And not until there's an actual physical green light is the scalpel handed over for the surgery. And they were able to eliminate wrong site surgeries doing that. So I think that sort of mechanism to ensure that we've gone through the whole process, that everything is good before we're even have access to the tools can help us go a long way into breaking out of that routine.
Yeah, and Sean, I want to ask you the same, but just to help people understand this study that we both, that Sharon shared with me, is fascinating. Wrong site surgeries are so sadly common, and we would think easily avoidable, but human nature is human nature. Let's just accept that. And this rather ingenious method of providing the scalpel in a closed locked box that will not be opened until all of the questions and prompts are dealt with, including, does anyone have a reason to believe that we don't have this correct, and things like that. I'm doing a terrible job of summarizing it, but it's a activity for the team. It's built into software to help run it. And there is an actual hardware mechanical aspect that doesn't allow access to the tool until everything has been satisfied. And the results were tremendous. We'll try to find it, get it posted, if not during this, then afterwards, for people that are fascinated by that. I'm sure people are thinking maybe that's something we could do with some of our lockout tagout or other applications with high hazard equipment and other sorts of things. So just because I tend to think in terms of, well, if I were watching this webinar, what would be the question I would immediately want to know? Hey, what's this research? So Sean, what about from what you've seen in your expertise and experience trying to break out of these routines, behaviors, and habits?
Well, to me, it is a big question, and the question for me really comes into the overall environment in which you're asking people to behave in, and going back to even the paper that you mentioned, I think one of the one of the big findings in those errors in surgery was also a cultural issue. The ability for someone to say, well, I think we've got a problem. and actually, they saw that as, you're being insubordinate, you're talking back. But the environment, I'm going to assume just for this program, that the environment that we are asking people to behave in is a controlled environment. It's not a environment where you get to come in and do whatever you want. It's a controlled environment. So my answer is accountability, accountability, accountability. Why? Well, because like you've said, we don't want to go against human nature. And human nature is to develop habits. As Sharon has pointed to, our brains are lazy. We don't want to remain 100% focused. We want to multitask. That's human nature. And developing habits is human nature. And it brings me to a story that I witnessed in Honduras. It was unbelievable. I was a big SOP freak many, many years ago. I believed you had to write as many SOPs as you could. And I've changed that philosophy and that belief in my mind based on what I witnessed in Honduras, which it was this lab that had unbelievable, simplistic, similar behaviors that I've never seen in anywhere in the world that I've ever been. Multiple people doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I asked them for their SOPs and they gave me a sticky note. And I was like, well, no, I need your SOPs. I want to see what you guys have done. And the reality is it wasn't the SOP. It was that they focused on developing habits from the very first day of work. And then they held those individuals accountable to the habits. And then sooner or later as a human being, your repetitive behaviors become habits. And as long as they're in line with the SOPs of the organization, you are working well and you've produced what we would consider a safe habit. And so that to me is, if we're talking about what can you do at home to change behaviors? Well, at home, you have the freedom to make choices, but at work, you're coming into an environment that's supposed to be controlled. And to a certain degree, we have to hold people accountable to the expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. Sharon, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I do. Well, I think it's important to mention, these cognitive biases are always a double-edged sword, and especially when it comes to habits. Habits are amazingly helpful, and they help us do more work more quickly, sometimes more effectively. But the double edge of that means is that when we are engaged in repetitive behavior, we don't have to be engaging the more executive functions of our brain, the things that are paying attention to what's going on around us, the part of our brain that's saying, what are the potential consequences of this? And so during repetitive work, we should always be aware that the tendency is for the brain to kind of go on autopilot. And so we do have to build in key moments where people are essentially like cognitively coming up for air and looking around and reconnecting with what's going on around them.
Sure. Yeah. The two things that occur to me from this, and I love this story, the micro story. Most people that know me know my fondness for stories, but part of that is I study that as well, is two things: psychological safety, which clearly plays a role, such as wrong site surgeries, as Sean was getting at, and Sharon too. And then also, isn't it fascinating that this lab that you spoke of, Sean, in Honduras, had such fantastic, what I would describe as a culture of safety. And they recognized, because to me, culture is merely how we do things around here, a phrase, a shortcut for it that I got from a colleague formerly at NIOSH, Elaine Cullen, who did a fantastic study on the power of stories in safety training. We're going to get to training in a bit here too. And so I think that these issues overlap tremendously. And, the more that we can really understand them and how they play out is so important. I don't know if either of you have something to piggyback on either of those topics, psychological safety or the, what I'll say is obviousness of an incredible culture that they had there.
I know that what I've seen is in organizations that separate what we would consider accountability and compliance. People, in my opinion, merge the definition of those two words as one, and I don't see that in my work. Accountability is you have positive and negative accountability. There's a set of expectations. Positive accountability is saying to someone, you have not only met the expectations and exceeded them, and we're reinforcing what you're wanting or what you're doing. Thank you so much. Good job. You're acknowledging what they're doing. Negative accountability is a challenge to many people today because you're trying to motivate someone who, and this is where what I'm getting to when we talk about compliance. In order for someone to be compliant, it's an attitude, it's a frame. It's, I am willing to try to live up to expectation. And if they are saying out loud, I'm not, I don't care what this organization wants from me, I'm not doing it. They're not compliant and their attitude is not setting up for the psychological state. They're not even priming to even behave. And so in order for you to be compliant, you have to have a willingness to try to get along within a culture, to give up a little bit of your autonomy to work safely in a culture with other people. When you give negative accountability, you have to do it in a manner that motivates people to keep trying. You as a leader have to own the inability of them to succeed and do it in a way that reinforces and strengthens their desire to continue to want to comply with the organization's expectations. So, yeah, to me, again, it's engagement and it's motivation from a behavioral standpoint.
Sure. Yeah. Sharon, did you want to add to that, please?
Kind of going off this idea of, positive recognition of what's going well. I mean, sometimes what I'll hear people say is like, God, do I really have to tell somebody good job for doing a good job? Right. And I think it's not really about giving out gold stars and ribbons for participation. What we really care about is results. What we know is that positive recognition works. And there's a great study in a hospital in New York, and they were trying to increase how often people were washing their hands before and leaving the ICU. And at this point in time, everybody was well aware of how important it was. There were signs posted. Each station was monitored with a video. People knew they were being watched. And even so, people were not washing their hands every time. So what they did is they did something different. They put a sign by the station, and every time that person washed their hands, there would be a positive message like good job on the sign. And the shift had a hand hygiene score. And so then the score would go up. And within 90 days, compliance of this policy went up to 90%. So we can, hedge and moan about, you're like, oh, do I really have to tell people good job? But yeah, you do, because if you care about results, what positive feedback tells people is that this is important, pay attention, do more of this, and people respond to that.
Yeah. So I want to piggyback on that and ask you a question really for you. So I mentioned it in our meeting beforehand. I was fascinated by this certification, gamification certified for training. And I think anyone who lives and works in the land of adult learning knows that gamification work wonders, but a lot of us don't necessarily know the science of it or the practice of it really, really well. So I think it fits in really well with this. And how does it really help in this area, Sharon? I think everyone would be fascinated.
Yeah, well, gamification is just the application of some gaming principles to training. So you might think about points, you might think about teams, but it's also more than that. It's about surprise. It's about a narrative. And it's important because nobody wants to sit through boring training. In an Ipsos survey, 90% of people said it was important that their training was engaging and fun. And especially when we come to safety, where we're often going through the same material over and over, right? And it's boring the first time. It's going to be even more boring the second time. And so you have to get through to people to break through that noise. You need to surprise them. And I'll give you an example. So I did an engagement with a utility company, and we were targeting safe driving principles. And these are people who are driving sometimes hundreds of miles in a day between locations. They'd been through a ton of mandatory driving training. They knew what it was that they were supposed to do. So what we did is we designed a game, and we had teams, and people would move around a racetrack. We called it the Amazingly Safe Race. And that they would move around the track by answering questions correctly on these principles that they already knew. And as they landed on different squares of the track, different things would happen. And every now and then we would have a Tyrannosaurus Rex come in and destroy a car. So it was a lot of fun. They'd never been through anything like it. lots of positive feedback. And by the end of our work together, we had increased those targeted safe driving principles by 157% because knowledge wasn't the problem.
Yeah, yeah, it usually isn't, right? So Sean, I wanted to, clearly people that are coming to you in your work, in your practice, I'm sure training ends up coming up quite a bit, or I imagine it does come up quite a bit. And I think that we rely too much on thinking that we've done training, so therefore it's fine. We've presented it and somehow by magic, people know it. And by further magic, which is just a little bit odd, they're automatically going to engage in this behavior, which I think all three of us would say, that's curious. Why do you think that? So, what are any experiences or anything you wanted to, add on to this discussion?
Well, sometimes when I witness a training, as a professional trainer, it hurts my heart. I'm a feeler. Some folks have asked questions about why is it so hard for people to give, positive feedback, and that to me is a personality issue. But we'll talk more later on that. But it hurts my heart sometimes when I sit through a PowerPoint presentation and people call it a training. To me, I have three different definitions. There's awareness building, which you are doing with a PowerPoint. And that's awesome. PowerPoints work. They increase the understanding of risk. They increase the understanding of benefit of behavior. And people need that. And that's good. Okay. But PowerPoints are not training programs. Training programs are behavioral based. They actually, they put people in a position to behave and to practice the behavior and to master the behavior. And then there's what I call education programs. One of my favorite, quotes, Einstein's, education without experience is a waste of time. And what I mean by that is education is when you take experience, you have somebody who's mastered a behavior, but now you're fine tuning it based on less than ideal situations or circumstances. You're doing exactly what Sharon says. You're going to take them out of the everyday boring norm, and you're going to challenge them, and they're going to use their experiences and their understanding of the behavior to master outside situations. So I think that to me, it's really understanding who you're training and understanding what you're delivering and the goal behind what you're delivering, so that you have an effective training program. So.
Yeah, very, very, very good. I love games in training. I feel my heart goes out to anyone going through bad training. I think everyone recognizes bad training. And so it's how do you do it? And I love games. And so for refreshers, as Sharon, you were getting at, I used to do the same HasWhopper, the same crew, main DOT, year after year after year. And I would create, like you, both of you, create games for them. The more I got them to be the creators of the questions and try to stump each other. And so I came up with a game where the entire day they're divided into teams and they're literally playing against each other, trying a little bit of the car talk, stump the chumps, right? Trying to stump each other. So much fun, friendly, I'll say friendly, air quotes, competition. And they always just, said, wow, that was 8 hours. I can't believe it, right? We just had fun the entire time. But let's now, sorry, folks, travel to the dark side of this when we talk about behavior. And Sean, I'll start over with you. So I'm sure, some are going to ask, well, what about the person who won't, whatever, where in this, at all, if at all, does punishment or blame some of the real, sort of evil things, I guess I'm thinking very Star Wars like today, right? Come into play, or don't they? What are we missing about this? What do we overascribe to that works against it? And, and if we are replacing it, then of course, with what? Which I think circles back to some of what we've discussed. But please, you guys are the experts here. So Sean, if you don't mind starting, please.
No, I come from my background's in behaviorism and from a Skinner approach, and I find very little benefit to punishment, unless, of course, it's saving a life. And so when I hear the word punishment, I'm hearing the word stop. And we know that if someone is behaving, they're not wasting calories, they're behaving for a reason. there's a need for that behavior. And so I always like to reframe and say start. So if I'm going to replace a behavior, I'm going to ask them to stop and start a behavior that becomes much easier for them to do. Punishment, again, stopping a behavior, reinforcement is increasing the overall frequency of behavior. Now I see in work, I talk about these, what we call these intentional stinkers, Jonathan, people who find jobs that they just don't like, and so they intentionally stink at them. I did that when I was younger with dishes, and my father had a perfect solution. I'll give an example of negative reinforcement. I did dishes very poorly one night. My father came in and looked at the dishes, and he left the house, and my mom said, I guess, well, you can go play. And I was, 9, 10 years old. And he came back about 30 minutes later and said, son, we've got a problem with the dishes. I said, yeah, Dad, I tried really hard. I guess I'm not really good at these dishes. My father said, well, son, try it or not. I can't debate that. They just didn't get done to where we were expecting. And I said, yeah, but I tried. He said, well, that doesn't matter. I need them to get done. So here's what I've done. Yes, Dad, what did you do? I went around the neighborhood, the cul-de-sac, and asked if everybody could do you could do their dishes tonight. And so you're going to go do their dishes, and then you're going to come back and do our dishes until you get them just right. And that was last time I was an intentional stinker. And so my point is this: if your human resources are up to par and they're hiring the right people for the right job, you don't hire a dolphin to climb a tree. You've got to make sure the people you hire are the right people to do the job. But the point I'm trying to get at is don't give up on people. Find creative ways, and just, don't give up on them, and continue to have faith that they will live up to an expectation. Jaime Escalante, the guy that did that movie Stand and Deliver, where he taught those kids calculus at the highest level, and they had to take the test like 4 times before they believed. His quote is, students will always rise to the level of expectation. And so it's about believing in the people you serve. So that's my
yeah. I have so much that I want to say. Very, very briefly, ups to your dad. I mean, I think that's the great thing about any parent, but in this case, I guess a dad coming up with a very clever, unique way of doing it. And thank you for your willingness to tell the story that's obviously a bit self-deprecating, but isn't it always interesting how we can reflect on our own change? And it's through a bit of pain. I will say changes I have made have come through quite a bit, which is usually internal mental anguish. I would say there's a role for that, but it's nice when it's done with the utmost of kindness and love, such as with your dear father. And I think that's quite lovely. Sharon, what about you on this whole issue of the blame, the pain? And then I'll throw on top of this, and we can do it a little bit more based on one of the questions. We're not formally answering it yet, but I'll get us to it. How do you have, I'll redescribe it, reframe it. I know you both know it, but Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard, which is used quite a bit in certain counseling and therapy. And so one of the questions that someone asked is, how do we get people to give positive feedback? How do we, as I think Sean and you, Sharon, are getting at, have a positive regard for people, even when it's not the behavior that we want, such as with your dad, Sean. So Sharon, there's a lot there. You choose whatever way you want to go.
Okay. So, and maybe I'll play the devil's advocate here for a little bit, and which is to say that, sometimes you do have somebody in an organization who's not a fit. And before you get to that point, you absolutely should be creative, and it should be a collaborative process, and there should be a lot of conversations, but sometimes there's somebody who's not a fit. And if there's not, then that needs to be addressed before there's a problem. Because once there's a problem, and let's say there's a serious accident, and now you fire that person for causing that serious accident, and you determine it was willful, and maybe it was, I don't know, but if it was, what you now have a role in this, because your organization has allowed this and tolerated this to happen. And then when that person gets fired, everybody else is going to be talking with each other about, people get fired around here for making mistakes. And that is going to damage psychological safety. It's going to keep people from talking with you more honestly, and it's going to hamper learning. So, if something does need to be addressed, that's something that you really do want to be on top of.
Yeah, and if we had tons and tons of time, I could see us talking a bit about obvious roles for leadership. How do you become a true learning organization? How do you own the systematized managerial aspects that tend to drive a lot of these things that we just don't always realize? So, but great. So, I think sometimes people always want to know what any wins or losses, frame it however you like. In my career, I had wins and losses. It was about saving students or others or workers or not. But for you, wins and losses with helping someone who is really struggling, or the person or persons who just weren't. There's a certain amount of reality to this, and anything along those lines that you could share that might be helpful to our audience. I think everyone is always interested in, well, it sounds challenging. You must have hit certain challenges that just frustrated you, but you also must have had wonderful experiences where you go, wow, I can't believe that we actually accomplished, fill in the blank. Who would like to go first now?
Sean, I'll let you go.
Sharon, your turn. Put you on the spot, man.
Man,
Sean,
Sharon, that's
what
twice
friends
now.
are
I'm gonna point to Sharon here. So are you asking for advice for the group, like for people that are listening? Is that what it is? I mean, because are you asking for personal victories or challenges?
I think it's either, really. I think everyone always wants to know from people who do this sort of thing at a high level, like both of you do. What have been some of the biggest challenges? What are the realities there? We don't always, I'm still framing it as a win and a loss, though don't restrict yourself to that. We don't always, choose your battles wisely. You can't win them all, and not to make them into battles. But I think you see what I'm saying. Is what are some of the realities of that? Sometimes people say, oh, that, like we've been saying, oh, that person, I just can't do anything with them. So maybe there's, a person that you worked with professionally, or a group or a team that you were able to turn around. And then there's the sad reality of sometimes, no matter what, we put our best efforts forward and, it's just not in the cards. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does. Jonathan, to me, I'm going to say manage expectations. The hardest thing that I've seen in having a behavioral, psychology background, being a counselor, being a coach, and doing a lot of counseling for those serving the profession of biosafety, realize what your job is and your limitations. We need you for the marathon. We don't need you short term. We need you long haul. We need you to not take things personal, like to remember it's not personal. We need you to be passionate. We know, we need you to be prepared to not have the resources and the time and get the feedback or the praise that you deserve, because you all are making a difference and making it safer. So I think the hardest thing for me, Jonathan, is watching a safety professional bang their head against the wall and feeling like they are failing because they can't get the change they're wanting. And I'm going to argue with you and say to you, that's okay. Your job is to identify risk and to communicate it upwards and let leadership take control at that point. Be someone, I call you pleasantly persistent. Be pleasantly persistent and be kind, but do not take it personal. Do not own it. It is not yours to own, and just do the best job that you can, because I need you for the long haul. I need you for the marathon. The sprint is not something that we need. So I think that's the hardest thing to witness, Jonathan, is when I see broken spirits, people that go into a job and they're just so energized and they're so eager and they're so excited. And then they get a couple PIs to just trash them. And then they feel useless and unvaluable. And it's like, whoa, let's back up here. Let's focus on you. Let's remember what your job is. Let's really truly try to put this in perspective so that you can serve for long hauls.
Very nice. And spoken like a true coach. I appreciate that very much. I felt like you were coaching me for a minute here, John. I loved it, right?
I need you, Jonathan. You stay. You're a good one. You got to keep going, buddy.
Thank you so much. Sharon, what about from your perspective on any of this? Again, in whatever direction works for you, please.
Well, I think one of the things that I enjoy most about the work I do is when I am doing a training and I see light bulbs going off for people, and like I've connected with what needs to change, with why they want to do it. And the only way to get there is to really be curious about people and what makes them tick. And so here's an example. I am doing with two different organizations training to increase the amount of positive feedback that is going on. And so I started working with that first organization. I did a bunch of interviews, and it really there wasn't really a lot of resistance there. It was just, do we have to do it? And then I started talking with this other organization, and we wanted to do positive feedback. And I thought, oh, this is great. I can just like copy everything that I just did, and it's going to be so easy for me. But I started my interviews, and what I realized, well, this actually has to be a very different training, because there is a lot of resistance. So there's a lot of cultural and generational beliefs about giving positive feedback for doing a good job. And I realized if I don't ever address that objection, nothing is going to happen from this. And so even when it's the same material, you have to understand who your audience is and frame it for them in a way that makes sense to them, that connects with them.
Yeah, very good. And I have such a great time. I lose track of time with this. I do want to make sure that we do launch our poll. So every webinar, we're always trying to figure out what are the best ones. And so there we go. My colleague and friend Matt has launched the poll. And so Sean, Sharon, and I can't vote in it, of course. So if all of you in the audience would please engage in the poll. We absolutely look at these. You wouldn't believe how meaningful these numbers. Every single vote is really important to us. It's how it helps us figure out the direction. There is an abbreviation there that you may or may not be familiar with. So the seventh one, safety culture, a JEDI approach via organizational culture. JEDI is an acronym that's used quite often. That's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. You just might not recognize it as such. So I just wanted to make that a little clearer. Or as we like to kiddingly say, de-obfuscated. Well, while people are doing the poll, we're going to move to the Q&A. We do have about 5 or so questions. And there is one more here that I think from some of the discussions that Sean, Sharon, and I had. I think we've touched on a lot of the topics that we talked about before, the role of leadership, voluntary versus mandated, what should the audience keep in mind that they might not realize. I feel like we've touched upon those tremendously. How do we make things more palatable, all of that sort of stuff. And so now the last one that I'll ask, and then we'll go over to the audience Q&A, is what about behavior change? Whether it's the Prochaska and DiClemente model of 5 stages, or another model that you might prefer, whatever. How do we help people assess where they are, or even understand that there are these different stages and steps that we go through that have been very well established, and then helping them progress. And it doesn't have to be real in depth, just something brief there. Sharon, do you want to just start us off on that quick?
Well, I'm not sure I can.
Okay. Sean, no worries. Do you want to sort of in behavioral, people are, well, you go ahead and do it. I know that this is an area of yours.
Well, again, when we look at behavior, we have to take a look at the environment, because that's such a lot of people continue to just believe that the environment does not influence our behavior, but it really does. And that's what a culture is. A culture is a part of an organization, a group of people that have a common set of risks. They have a common set of rules, and they have a common set of rituals. I call it the R3 factor, so to speak. And whether that's naturally or it's in a controlled environment, the same thing is real. The hardest part for me, Jonathan, is when you look at an individual. Of course, you can use Prochaska stages of change, and for many of you, I know many of you have heard me speak in the past about this, but you're really looking at an individual that's in the pre-contemplative state. They would argue that there's just no need to change. A contemplative state, which is, I want to change, but we call these behavioral procrastinators. I just don't want to do this right now. Kind of like me with vegetables right now. I enjoy my meat so much that I'll eat vegetables later in life, I guess. But then you've got people that, all of a sudden I get a diagnosis of heart disease, and now I really do want to change, and I need to change right away. That's preparedness, and then there's action, and then of course there's reinforcement, and then relapse. Evaluating those individuals, on a scale of behavioral aspects individually within a culture, to me is troublesome. And what I mean by that is just kind of picking on people, and it's an independent variable amongst a system of safety. I really do and really would love to evaluate culture using Prochaska. I really would. I think that'd be very fascinating. To take a look at a culture of safety and determine where it is in regards to safety behaviors. But again, that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
Sharon,
And then, yeah, Sharon, maybe, especially if you've seen people groups go through various phases when it comes to trying to develop habits as you help them with.
Well, trying to accelerate people along that track, one thing that you can do is kind of play the movie forward. Like, if this doesn't change, what are the consequences of that? And getting, kind of as deep as you can get in a corporate environment, because the more emotional, the more that people connect between my behavior right now and what it could cost me in the future, that if I don't do this, if I don't adopt this new behavior, I could get seriously injured at work. And if I got seriously injured at work, here's what this would mean. And this is how it would impact my family. And this is what it would impact my retirement. And that's one way that you can kind of accelerate people. Just play that movie forward so that they don't have to wait until they get the heart diagnosis to, decide it's time to start eating some vegetables.
Cool. Yeah. I don't have the vegetable problem. I like my fruits and veggies. I have other things that I procrastinate wildly.
Jonathan, the veggies thing is a legitimate issue, because it's not about the barriers of, well, do you have access to veggies? Yeah, I do. It's my problem isn't can I buy them or do I have access to them, as so many people around the world may have those issues. My problem is I can't get them to taste good. Now, if I met somebody that could give me that skill, I would be very open, because right now I'm sorry, I just still cannot find now, other than in India. In India, I've found a great way to get vegetables that taste phenomenal. But, it's really one of those things where I have a hard time taking a look at asparagus and saying, wow, I can make you look real good or taste good, unless, of course, I throw it in with bacon. But what's the point then?
And so what we have here is a great example of how important problem solving is.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep,
so we've identified the behavior change that we want. We've identified the reason why we want to get there. Yep. But in between there, I have some issues. And if we don't address those, then people aren't going to change.
That's correct. That's correct. Very true.
Yeah. Welcome to the counseling hour. Sharon's going to help me with my insomnia, and Sean with his problem with veggies. Without turning it into the food hour or something like that, maybe, chop them up really small and put them in soups and stews and, et cetera, casseroles, et cetera, where they don't taste. And anyway, totally different. Why don't we go to the questions that our audience actually have asked here? So the first is from Chris. And so it's a university laboratory setting, PIs, principal investigators, frontline managers. They have a certain amount of autonomy from the organization, from the university as a whole, which I think we all kind of know. I won't say and love necessarily, but it works to an extent. So what Chris asks is, how can we improve the accountability where this sort of environment actively values this level of autonomy? And if it helps, the metaphor I used for my previous boss, who was the dean of engineering at another institution, was this is like franchisees, right? They can't run the whole organization, but they've got a lot of control over their franchise organizations. So, and Chris, I know you have a deep knowledge and experience in this area anyway, but for those who may not, that it's a working metaphor.
So I think what I would say to that, and Jonathan, when you put the slides up at the beginning where you're like, the best advice that I can give you, I think that what I said is the answers are in the room. And my first suggestion would be, I suspect that you already have the answers in your organization on how you do that. And one of the ways you can start to figure that out is, who are the people who are doing it the way that we want to be doing? What's working for them? Where's our successes? What part of that can we kind of amplify and make more firm? And then figuring out, what's keeping the other people from doing it. So I don't think that there's a prescriptive answer that we can give you, except start getting really curious about what's going on in your organization. When it's happening the way we want it to, why? And when it's not happening, why? And there's going to be more than one answer for, both of those questions.
Sure. And I'll say, I actually worked a heck of a lot longer as a consultant than I did as an in-house person in academia. It's not terribly different in industry, the way area and department supervisors have quite a bit of autonomy. Whether or not leadership on high has really granted it formally, that's the reality of it. And some use it well, and obviously some abuse it. So, but Sean, what about from your perspective on Chris's question?
Well, this is it's a tough one, because he put in PIs. Now let's talk a little bit about PIs. Now, if you've got your PI that's just out of grad school and is maybe more of a cost than a benefit to the university, accountability is easy with that PI. But when you've got a PI that's bringing in $30-40 million, all of a sudden safety becomes blind, or not blind. It becomes like, well, let's leave this PI alone and focus on this one and let this PI do whatever they want. So I think we have to first understand the nature of the beast. Which is sometimes expectations vary depending on the individuals who we're asking to behave. Just calling that out. I think, look, I'm going to stick with this. You have to care. I mean, you have to care. And one thing I noticed, by the way, Jonathan, an upcoming talk is onboarding. We have for a long time in safety overlooked the absolute critical nature of onboarding, and even actually offboarding. When we look at inventory aspects and we look at the impact of a staff member leaving a particular lab. But onboarding is huge. It's in my opinion, one of the biggest risks to an existing safety culture. Because if you do not onboard someone properly and you do not ensure that they understand the expectations the organization is laying forth from a safety perspective in front of them, you can get agreement right off the bat, right when they come in the organization. And so, Chris, I wish I had a solution, but my biggest solution is that the organization actually has to set clear expectations and then really truly care whether those expectations are being met. And, and there's a variety of tools that you can use, from audits, just walking around, talking. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be done to make observations.
Great. Yeah, very good. I will say, in case you didn't see it, people in the chat, Carmen, have said roasted veggies were my lunch today. Also veggie skewers. Danielle, roasted asparagus. She's giving you a recipe.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. This is awesome.
This is part of the magic that we have here, is when, and this is what we were speaking of, before. It's a really very, very supportive community that exists, and it's wonderful. And Dale is saying fried okra. I've never tried fried okra, and I'm not a fan of okra, so I definitely will give that an attempt, Dale. So thank you. All right, Sharon. So Danielle and at least 3 others are very curious on your gamification and education certification, and so many Asians there. And so can you recommend, the question is, can you recommend a course? Is that something that you provide? Do you then credential others, or do they have to go through a separate credentialing? But are there great courses to help people either gain knowledge and skills, or perhaps even get to the certification level? And I'm sure it's pretty complex or whatever. So if you can help us kind of understand that in a nutshell, that would be great.
Well, I can't really recommend one. I can tell you the one that I took, and I just typed it in the chat so that you have the spelling of it. It's called Sententia, and it's a 3-level process, and you learn different concepts as you go. Your mileage may vary. I can't recommend it or not recommend it, but for me, I found it valuable.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I think it's a great area. And you can guarantee I'm going to ask you, once we're done with this, more questions when it comes to gamification and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, wonderful. All right, so let's see what the next one is for you both. Tyler asked a question here, and a couple others are very interested as well. And it has to do, so a little bit more, we started this, people are hesitant to give positive feedback, or at least we tend to see that. And so, you know, it's challenging. Tyler says, I don't understand why people don't like to give people, you know, this feedback. Hey, you're doing a good job. You know, is it a problem where it comes across as insincere for some reason? I mean, I will just briefly say, and when I was at Arizona State, we could give out Sun Awards, and I gave out Sun Awards to a couple of staff persons for doing things that really helped me tremendously. The replies were, I was just doing my job, but thank you very much. And I said that, you know, when people do a good job, it should never go unstated. And then I said it in a better way. My son, who has a whole bunch of tattoos on his arm, like that saying, I forget exactly my words. Well, something like compliments should never go unstated, something like that. He liked it so much, he tattooed it on his arm.
Oh, isn't that nice? There's actually a quote that I use, and it said, feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it. Right? It's got to leave the inside of your head, and however that happens. So why do people not do it? I can only share with you kind of what I've experienced recently in these past couple engagements. You know, in some cases it's like, well, I just never thought about it. Like, really? I don't need it. Why do other people need it? And then sometimes it's like, well, I don't know how to do it. It feels weird. I don't know what to say. What should I be talking about? And then in this other organization, I also found like a vein of deep resistance. Like, I don't want to tell people they're doing a good job. I don't need a good job. That's kids these days. You know, this is the millennial generation, and they just need pats on the back all the time. And so, you know, each of those need to be addressed differently. So one is, first of all, let's think about doing it. It works. Here's the evidence that it actually works. Here's all of the things that you could be giving positive feedback on. Let's brainstorm everything in your organization, or that as a supervisor, you want to see more of. What are those things? Let's list it out. Those are your candidates. That's where you're giving people positive feedback on. Anything you want to see more of. We prepare people that, yeah, it is going to feel weird. It's going to feel weird. It's like learning to ride a bike, but you're going to get there. And then in the case of, you know, like serious resistance, we just have to talk about, you know, it works. Other people care about it. And also kind of an idea. And for this particular organization, you know, I really tapped heavily into this idea of gratitude, and how gratitude helps us, and how it makes us feel better, and how it impacts other people. So there are a number of reasons why.
Good. Sean, how's about from your frame and perspective?
I mean, I think that there's something very unique about us as humans. We're almost ingrained so much so that we wait until people die to give a eulogy. And I always like to say we should have a living eulogy at least once a year, for, if not every day, for people that we love, and just letting them know how much they've had an impact in our lives. I agree with Sharon tremendously. I think that it's a skill. I think that people have to understand it. I think that sometimes it can be taken wrong. So people are afraid of it coming off wrong, or there's some type of motive behind giving praise for when someone's doing a good job. And people need to know how to do it. We, in our programs, we used to, a weekly assignment that people would have to do is go find somebody who's done a great job, take a photo with them, and explain why they were doing a great job. And it was, kind of a positive safety message, so to speak. And it was shared with the organization. I think that the word stop is very important to understand as punishment. It's just like a police officer. Police officer pulls on the road, people stop speeding. Police officer then pulls off the road, they start speeding again. I like the analogy of picking your nose. I know it's gross, it's disgusting. It's a booger. You see a little kid and he's picking his nose, and the parent yells, "Stop picking your nose." And the kid stops picking his nose around the parent. So the parent's fine. Then the kid goes around the corner and keeps picking his nose just away from the parent. No new learned behavior, but the parent thinks the word stop has worked. And I think that that's what negative feedback does, is it pushes the behavior away from you. So it's so easy because you don't have to own it. You say stop and it goes away. And so when you start praising people for what they're doing well, it takes a lot more time and a lot more patience. It's not as quick as the whole stop because you think it's working, but in reality, it's just pushing the behavior further away from you, suppressing it, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I love the examples both of you give. That's for sure. I think it's this openness and honesty and transparency in these things, and how do we help people understand some of these things better, which is obviously what we're trying to accomplish here, along the lines of what I think Sharon was getting at, and Sean has seen as well. This, I value that I don't need to be told I'm doing a good job. Therefore, I don't feel it's helpful for me to tell people, or I don't want to, or I'm uncomfortable telling people they had a good job. I ran into this in a investigation I did for a very large construction company where I interviewed 100 people, and a certain percentage, it wasn't clearly everyone. One of the problems was, what do they do for an incentive system? And I got several that said, I don't need a gift card for being safe. That's part of who I am. That's part of my expectation. That's part of my job. And so it was really, they felt insulted by this gift for doing something that they felt was part of them. And so I think we can all see that when it's about our own sense of identity and self-value, we internalize that so much that, of course, it comes out externally, and that then would interfere with our willingness to do it. We can order someone to do it, but as I like to say in a talk I used to do, behavior change does not involve a whip and a chair, right? You can train the big cats, but that doesn't mean that their behaviors have changed very much, right?
Jonathan, if I could add one more thing.
Yeah, please do.
You shook the cages a little bit, but I think that if we look at the goal of what we're talking about, I don't think it's positive feedback. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it as an opportunity to remind them that their behaviors have an impact on the safety of those who share the environment with them. They're part of a team. So rather than saying, hey, you're doing a great job and I'm cheerleading you, I'm just letting you know that we appreciate you, because everything you do has an impact on everyone else around you. There are people watching you that you don't know are watching you. There are people working in the same space that you're working in. So every time you follow an SOP, you make this place not only safer for yourself, which is inherent, but you make it safer for everybody else. So we appreciate it. So
yeah, Sharon, if you wanted to add anything onto that, please feel free.
Yeah, recognizing that, people, and Eldine mentioned in the chat, and that's true, right? Some people want public, some people want private. Jonathan, some people want the gift card and some people don't. So we always have to be watching, how do people respond? But I think we have to recognize the limitations of external influences in general, but especially when it comes to rewards. When we're trying to externally reward people, we can have unintended consequences, let's just say. So I'm not necessarily a fan of cards and gift cards, but I think the more specific you can get and the more immediate that you can get to it. So, again, my experience more being in kind of the construction and utility world, at the end of the day, when we're kind of doing our debrief on what happened, it's like, so we had good signs out today. Thanks, Joe, for making sure that we had proper signage. And this person noticed that this person was in the swing zone and we paused the job so that they could move out of the way. Getting very specific about the behaviors that you want to see, and then mentioning that, because then people know that's important. Let's do more of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. In case anyone was wonderful idea about incentives and all, if they're curious, the people at this company I helped, what they wanted? They wanted company swag. They wanted, and it's construction, they're outdoor, and they wanted the coats and they wanted the hats and they wanted the gear, which they needed for their job, but they were so proud of what they did, their craftsmanship and belonging to this very family-oriented company, and very large, several hundred people in it. that was what it was. And so by asking people, by talking to people, by getting more involved on an intimate basis, one-on-one, it's amazing how open people will be to you. And I think that's an important part of the that all three of us really want to bring. Well, we're past the hour and we still have a whole bunch of people staying. We're still up at about where we were an hour ago, 80 something people. And Sean and Sharon have been very generous. And if you have a few more minutes, we'll do a couple more questions from the Q&A. I did want to see what the Menti poll was. And now I'm struggling to find my...
While you're doing that, Jonathan, is it okay if I mention something that I feel is important to add to the discussion about behavior changes? I feel like we also have to recognize our limitations as far as what you can do when it comes to influencing people, right? You can't control people, which is actually a good thing. Like, you would not want that kind of responsibility in your life. But what we're doing is influencing, and we can nudge, and the level of influence we have depends on a number of factors. In a lot of senses, it really comes down to the strength of our relationship with them. How much do they trust us? How much do they value our insights? How much do they feel like we care about them? And then, even knowing and even building on that relationship, I think we have to be prepared to understand that we're not going to be able to influence everybody all of the time to do what we want them to do. That's just not how people work.
Nope, they don't. How many times have I been so resistant to change from others? And at this point in my life, what have I changed on my own? Partially through people giving positive, but also partially through people helping me understand some of the things, behaviors, habits, actions that I was doing that just weren't very helpful to me or to those around me for those specific things. It's amazing what you can do when someone really helps you, like both of you do, open your eyes to seeing the reality, because we're often, as I think Sean got at, blind to really how we are viewed. Again, it's perspective taking, right? So let's do this. Tyler had asked again about engaging in positive feedback systems. In the interest of fairness to everyone, I think we really have covered positive feedback quite extensively. So I'm going to go to a couple others because we really are running out of time here. Dale asked, and I'm going to ask the question and then do Dale's context for us all. So what are ways to create a comfort level needed to bring those questions out? And those questions, what Dale says, we've turned things upside down, so to speak, by putting frontline employees in positions of responsibility regarding SOP, standard operating procedures. Managers put in a way on the same level by being open to review and improvement, really engages all employees of the lab to contribute, but we still feel employees are not providing real constructive criticism, though we know we can. So again, comfort level, obvious issues of psychological safety, which we've talked about somewhat, but feel free to go in whatever direction works. And I'll start with you, Sean, if you don't mind.
No problem. Dale, first and foremost, I want to congratulate you. It seems like what you've done is flattened your organization, which I think is a beautiful start. And it appears to me, and I may be wrong, that it may have been a recent change. As now again, I could be assuming that, and so forgive me. And if that is the case, if it's recent, and what I mean by recent, within the last 6-7 months, I think you're just going to have to give it time to foster trust. So what you've done by flattening the organization is you've put management and frontline on the same line and the same level, and they're getting to know one another. And I would recommend fostering some team events and some social events, where you can get them to, maybe some game, some type of gaming situation where you start building a more positive relationship. Everybody kind of knows where they are in the organization, but they've got to have time to develop that relationship of communication. Because to me, this is an outstanding question, Jonathan, because I think a phenomenal first couple steps have really gone into place. I think the question really is where are we on the timeline? I'd like to know that. If this is something that you've done 5 years ago and you're still running into this issue, then there is something I like to call a reverse safety issue. That is, you've done for the sake of safety, but it's causing an adverse event. And there is something going on there. So, but if this is a recent thing, I would say this is this is to be expected. And I would focus on getting the group together and encouraging a social, some type of event where, people can get to know one another. Because I think that that'll only improve on communication aspects.
Yeah, and there are certainly within training, and there's one last question for training, but Sharon, to ask you to also respond to Dale's first. But briefly, there are certain methods or activities or exercises within typical adult learning training approaches, such as the fishbowl technique and other things that allow people a safe space to talk. I'll throw in my bias, which is always towards stories, and how do we take the stories around the campfire that we really did from way back before we could really do much else, and turn it into stories around the Bunsen burner, so to speak, if you follow that analogy. Obviously, story sharing has a real firm place for a lot of this. So Sharon, any additional reflections on what Dale was getting at?
So I think I'd come back to the same advice that I keep giving, which are the answers are in the room. Talk to people, and you might find out like this is actually really new and we think it's going okay, or they might tell you, well, we don't know how to fill it out, or they might tell you we don't have time, the form's too complicated. So the answers are in the room, and the more curious you can get about what's going on with people, the better answers you're going to get about how do we address it.
Great, thank you. Dale added, Sean, it's about a year old. You probably saw that. Yeah. So it sounds like some more work, but some more opportunities as well from what Sean was saying. And I think that's fantastic too. So there's one last question. I'm going to go to Sharon first because it's about training games. You probably saw it, but I'll read it for folks. And I love this question. And maybe it's a fun one to end on here. And we'll do it. We'll try to be quick, folks. So any ideas, Kathleen wants to know, any ideas on how to create a training game for doing animal training techniques, such as bleeding and dosing techniques in research? And I'm not sure how much we have to know exactly what bleeding and dosing are in this context, but how do you take something that's very technical, very significant here, fraught with issues and challenges, and from a training standpoint, turn it into a training game, which hopefully would be fun and all the things we've been talking about. A bit of a challenge for both of you to kind of on the moment come up with.
I have no idea what these things mean. So it's very challenging for me. So I don't really have a great question for that, unless you want to like kind of get me up to speed a little bit on, dosing techniques.
I don't think we have time for that. Sean, if you have one, feel free. I've got an idea rattling around in the emptiness of my head I can share too, if that helps us.
I'm just gonna have Sharon just needs to say what she said. Look, the answers are in the room, and I like her. I like it. No, I mean, I really do, because we've done these before, and the best thing is to really ask the techs, how would you do this? And listen to them, and they have amazing ideas. But, and this is the key. Kathleen asked a great question, but I think that we always have to identify a goal of training. What is the goal? What are we trying to do? Because bleeding and dosing is, think about the multiple behaviors that occur in both of those. We have to focus on what is it from a behavioral standpoint we're trying to accomplish. And is it a greater awareness? Is it a greater teamwork? Is it safety around the needle? Is it more, specificity? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And then, based on that, develop some type of, but again, Sharon would be a wonderful resource here, because Sharon doesn't need to know these things. She just has to watch the behavior and understand the goal. And then Sharon could implement her expertise beautifully here. And it would be neat to see what she comes up with. So.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Having been dragged into both when I was an external consultant and an internal one, so many different engineering aspects that there was no way I could have known all of the details, and made it very easy for me. I felt totally comfortable saying, I'm sorry, I'm ignorant of exactly what this process is, or the science is, or what. So just boil it down for me. What is it you're trying to do? What is your end game, right? What is your goal? What is it that you want? And then I would always back up to, I think what both Sharon and Sean have gotten at, we're going to have to wrap up, is how do you involve people? What's the culture? What are you trying to do? Adult learning principle. How do you recognize people's own expertise and their desire to contribute to this? And so my game approach in general is usually, like I said before, how do I get them to be engaging in the asking each other the questions that matter? And then how do I just facilitate that? How do I design it to make it easy, to make it fun, to make it, engaging, and as we're getting at, so it's getting to the intended outcome. So Sharon, anything to add to that? You get the last word here on this one.
And I would say it's probably an advantage not to know much about it when you're designing a game, because it starts to unleash your creativity and you can kind of start to see associations between things. So yeah, it's
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you.
No, I think it's perfect. Too many times we put our own lens in it because we know a great deal or at least somewhat about it. And sometimes not knowing anything about it lets us really take a different look, and you go, why are they doing that? That makes no sense. Maybe I'm not getting something, but maybe they're not. Well, listen, we have gone past, not only past the hour, past the quarter after the hour, which is usually our final hard stop. And I just want to say so many things. Thank you all who stayed around. We still have like 62 people. So I think that's a statement to the topic, and it's a statement to both Sean and Sharon. People don't stick around for something that's not valuable to them, but they do for stuff that is valuable to them. I think these soft skills, these non-hard technical, hard challenging, but not what I think people know, are so critical. We can't do anything if we can't understand ourselves, first and foremost. And how do we really help people understand themselves better in such a supportive, but really true and honest way? And I think that Sean and Sharon have done just a fantastic job of doing it. And I think we've left a lot on the table, but I think we've covered a heck of a lot of territory here. And everyone, I think, in the chat is saying that as well. And they appreciate it very, very much. To you both. Feel free, any final, you can do the what's up doc if you can really affect a really good Porky Pig if you want, but
Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you are making a difference. That's all. Stay with it.
Excellent. Sharon?
No final words of wisdom, but
that's okay.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you both very, very much. Everyone take care, and this will end it for us all.